Alright, doing another unboxing video, this time of Avalon Hill's Knights of the Air. This game has kind of cropped up in my Board Game Geek guild recently with a number of guys playing it. So I found a unpunched copy on eBay that was in pretty good shape. A little shelfware on the box, but otherwise was in good condition. I did have to fix a blown out corner on the bottom part of the box. Usually you're more familiar with the top corners of a box being blown out, but for Avalon Hill games that have the mounted boards in them, a lot of times the bottom part of the box ends up getting a corner blown out on it. I don't know if because of the way the mounted boards slide around in there, putting more strain on the lower part as opposed to the lid. But you can see fairly typical Avalon Hill game box. This was from 1987, so a little bit later in the era of Avalon Hill than some of their more classic games. You can see complexity medium, solitaire suitability high, so which is interesting for a plotted movement game. So I have not played this. I kind of ran through a couple of turns with some of the members of my guild, so I don't really have experience with it, but it is fairly complex. That complexity medium might be questionable, but it's something that I think, once you understand how all the systems work on it, it's pretty quickly picked up. It's just the things, there's a lot of tables, a lot of charts, a lot of concepts of dealing with time and speed and comparing numbers and arriving at calculated numbers for things. So just that kind of stuff that once you learn how to do it all, you can kind of put it together pretty easily. So taking a look inside, and you can see I've got another World War I flying game sitting out there currently on my table as well, Wings, which somehow seems less complicated than Knights of the Air, and yet has what feels like substantially more rules. Not to get totally off track here, but the rule book for Wings, first of all, it's one of these Yaquinto rule books, which, or Yaquinto, however you want to pronounce it, which are, it's kind of annoying in this long page format, but this had, 52 pages of rules, so a lot more rules than what the Knights of the Air rulebook has, which is only 24 pages of rules. That's charts there too, and I think that's all scenarios. I mean, there's scenarios in the Wings book too, so, but yeah, so really only 16 pages of actual rules in Knights of the Air, which felt, when I played it, because I haven't read the rules cover to cover yet, when I played it, felt more complicated than 16 pages of rules. Charts and tables, cards in here, and the interesting thing is, or not so much interesting, it's kind of annoying, like a lot of games of this 1980s era, this was, the charts and tables were the center page of the rule book. You had to pop the staples, pull these out, and then cut them in half, because it was literally just, a fold over page in the middle of the book. And it's the same, it's one chart for each player, basically. Damage and gunfire tables and damage tables, these are identical, and you had to cut them apart, pop them out of the rule book and cut them apart. So feels very much like something that the old TSR SPI games, after TSR bought out SPI, a lot of their games that they released in that early 80s period before they just shuttered the whole enterprise had that same sort of thing, where it was a big rule book that had charts and tables just on regular paper that you'd pull out of the rule book. So that's a little bit annoying here, because you don't have, especially given that the game has cards on cardstock, and then has a ton of these heavy you know, heavy stock paper, not really cardstock, but heavy stock paper, airplane cards or tables or whatever you want to call them, charts, I guess, because each plane that you're flying, you'll track their control stick and their speed, and their engine throttle. So you'll have, you know, counters that track that as you're playing through. So these are important to the actual play of the game. So it definitely makes sense that they would want those to be heavier. And these came on a like sort of giant perforated, like folded perforated sheets. And so I separated these out, and I don't know if I can see here on the camera. You can see that kind of perforated edge. I cut mine all out. I mean, you could use scissors if you wanted, just because if you just punch it out, the perforation, you'll just have this like perforated, tufted, perforated edge if you try and punch them out. So I used my handy dandy rotary cutter, which is what I use also to get counters, especially side-mounted counters, out cleanly from a counter sheet. So that worked just fine for getting these out, and also for separating the cards. The cards came on sheets as well, like most of these 1980s era games that had cards, they would be just on sheets and you'd punch them out. But there's a ton of these plain charts that come with this, and I don't know how many. And this one came with extras for some reason. I had an extra sheet of like 4. Let's see, those are the maneuver cards. Yeah, 20 aircraft performance cards. I think I had an extra 4 that were duplicates, so I ended up coming with 24 of these cards. But you can see they're double-sided, different planes on each side, and all of them have different performance capabilities, different damage capacity and things like that, and then probably, yeah, different maneuvers that they're capable of performing. You can see here the Roland has considerably fewer maneuvers that it's capable of doing. So these things are really cool, I think, just because they made a sheet for them where you can actually track on the sheet and use it during the game, which I think is pretty nice, as opposed to just having, you know, a bunch of data listed in the rule book or something that you could have to try and memorize or keep track of in some other way. So these all of these playing cards are really nice, and you can see, like I said, there is a ton of them, or 20 of them to be exact. So, but you know, they all look like that, and they all had to be punched out. So a nice pile of heavy cardstock. But you know, when you see the not heavy cardstock, but the heavy paper stock, like those and actual cards, you wonder why they didn't just throw in, you know, cardstock damage and gunfire tables, instead of making you have to cut them out of the rule book, and then they're just on, you know, normal paper. Decent, you know, real paper as opposed to that glossy crap that most rule books have nowadays. But yeah, overall, typical Avalon Hill rules, 2 columns, as opposed to the typical SPI 3 column from, you know, that slightly earlier era of wargaming. And 3 colors, so not, you know, a full color rule book. Advertisement for the general in there. I do need to look and see. There's probably general, some general articles on Knights of the Air that have additions or changes or optional stuff. Usually there's, if not dedicated issues, then, you know, at least multiple articles available for use. And then for the cards, we have, I'll just open one of these bags because all the cards are the same. They're different colors. I think there's 6 different colors. So the colors on one side, if you have multiple people playing the game. Oh, there's the yellow. So there's blue and yellow together. I think there's like 16 cards each. But these have the maneuvers, and then probably the number, I think, is probably the number of action points required to do. No, that's not right, because a wing over is more than 2 action points, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure what the numbers are. Since I played this on Vassal, I didn't use the actual cards when I played through it, so I'm actually not sure entirely what the cards do. But they do, the cards do have a nice illustration of what exactly, of how the plane actually is positioned during the maneuver. Like, see, for the falling leaf, how complicated a maneuver that is based on the little diagram and the way that the plane actually moves during the maneuver. So that's kind of nice to have. And there's plenty of maneuvers to choose from. And then you get to do some complicated calculations when you figure out, or as you're figuring out how to execute the maneuver. So again, all these are cards, and I used my rotary cutter to try and avoid the tearaway tufted edges that you would usually get on cards if you just punched them out by hand, as opposed to more carefully cutting them out. It just makes for a little nicer look at the end of the day. And then just one sheet of counters with all your planes, and these are they are kind of, you can see some side mounting there. Not like every counter, but most counters in this era had, for every other counter or so, had a little side nibs on them, which is always annoying. But again, the rotary cutter can usually just nick those little side nibs right off. So you can see the Zeppelin there. The game's got a Zeppelin in it. Assorted markers and so forth there. And then all your planes. Fairly simple, not overly complicated counters, and blank on the back. So yeah, not a counter dense type of game, and very colorful, as it were. And then, like most Avalon Hill games at the time, mounted board, catalog, and reply card, in case you want to let Avalon Hill know what your opinions are. Now this, if you look at this, just because I have the wings board out, it's a way to, and the wings is just cardstock with these, and these 3 sections, which is one way the game can allow you to, I think, run off the edge, and you just move a section over and, keep your planes moving in one direction. So it creates that sort of, I don't know what you call it, infinite board effect. Let's see if I can actually get this out one-handed. But in terms of artwork, the Knights of the Air board is actually very, very good looking. Let's get it open here. The artwork on it is much more attractive than the wings board. So, and not to make this totally a comparison with wings, but it's easy to do. I'll have it out. So you can see there's some texture. You got some fields kind of painted on there. And then here you can see the trench line below. So it's, a much more subtle, but still, painted terrain, as opposed to the Knights of the Air board, which is just much, much more detailed and very prettily painted, almost like watercolored paints on here, and all the textures around the trenches and the artillery craters and stuff, showing the battle damage of the French countryside. And you can see no man's land between the 2 trench lines with the river there. This feels like a, it's got rivers and stuff on it, which, the wings doesn't. It just kind of has the hazy trench details on it. and some hazy field details, and what appears to be kind of like wisps of cloud. This doesn't have any clouds illustrated on it, but just generally looks, more dramatic in terms of the actual terrain that the planes are flying over. And then a couple of charts there. You got like an altitude chart that tracks the altitude of the different planes, and your reaction chart, your time chart here, where you got to figure out how many like fractions of a second, is each movement point, based on your speed. So you're tracking stuff like that in the game, if that gives you any idea of how complicated it is. But really just a gorgeous board. It's too bad you don't have some full color plane counters to use on it. They're just 2-color or 3-color plane markers that are fairly dull, Allied German. So it would be kind of cool if you'd had more like fully illustrated plane counters to put on such a gorgeous board. So anyway, this is a quick look of Knights of the Air, and fairly typical Avalon Hill cover there too. And I always like how Avalon Hill has this sort of the Avalon Hill Game Company's trademark for its World War I air game. Like every game they have has, the Avalon Hill Company's trademark for its blah, 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 game XYZ game, which is, I don't know. There's something funny, kind of like, I don't know, old school or charming or what it is about that. But anyway, there's a look at Avalon Hill's Knights of the Air. I look forward to playing more.